Hello again, and welcome to Media War Stories Behind the Scenes Tales from the front lines of the media. I'm your host, Tom Curley of Get Off My Lawn. Welcome back. Normally, we are here with our good friend Gary Armstrong, veteran broadcaster, but today we have something special back from the past. My buddy Joe Marcus. Joey, how are you today, veteran CBS audio engineer
Hey,
and
Tommy,
all around
how
nice
are you?
guy? How you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine. Uh, it's uh, it's October. We're in the middle of another madness election cycle. Although I think you can agree, um, I thought we'd seen it all through the years, but there's never been an election like this. This is absolutely crazy because Joey and I have been here on the like I said on the front lines on the audio board live for basically every election night in one way or the other, and Joey's got some good stories. One of the themes that I bring up all the time is, and I ask everybody on the show, do we have stories about where we get the job done in spite of the producers and management and everybody, not because of them? And the number of times that we have had to pull, you know, our asses out of a fire and improvise like MacGyver is insane. And we've got a couple of other good ones, but we're going to start. Joey, tell us. There was one. Was it a convention, right? A political
Right,
convention,
it
and
was
the crap they put
uh,
you through.
right in 1988 we were in New Orleans, and again, the CBS this morning was on its own in the city. We were at a hotel, and everything was going fine. I was the assist to the great Bobby Siderman in that case, and everything was going well. We had a singer on the show, a brand new singer from New Orleans. I was barely like 20 years old, maybe at the time, name of Harry Connick Jr. Um, the reason we had put him on the show was because we had an interview with the current district attorney of New Orleans, who was Harry Connick Sr. And that's the reason I think
No
we ended
shit.
up putting his son on, who was
Wow.
very big locally, but was first breaking out into the mainstream. So, but that was one thing. He just sang with the piano on the show. It worked out well. Um, but then the last day of the convention, that morning, only maybe an hour or two before air, they came up to me and said that they had just booked the Neville brothers in a little club across the street from where we were, and could I mix it? And this is live, of course. And I said, well, okay, but what do we have? Who can you spare that can help me? Nobody. We have nobody else right now. Can do. What equipment do we have? Well, just what's on the truck. That's all we've got. So, all right. So I go to the truck and we're looking, and the only thing they have is an audio console. Is I don't know if you remember, they had this remote mixer that they used. It was I don't know, maybe it might have been 16 inputs, but the problem was it only had stereo line level inputs. There were no preamps on it at all. It was meant as to mix tapes and things like that. There were no preamps, so it could not plug a microphone directly into the mixer. So I said, "Well, I can't use this."
I
So
can't
and then, well,
use
that's all we
it.
have. But we do have, those external little Shure preamps, the I think it was FP11s. Those. So how many do you have of
Mhm.
those? Well, we got about a dozen of those. So I don't know if it's going to be enough. So I gathered every one of them that we had and a few others, and we got everything, and I lined them all. So I brought that over. I'm still on my own, by the way, at the time. So we dragged some tables around. I had some, like one of the guys who could just help me, but he wasn't an audio guy. So I dragged the table around. I set up the console, plugged it in, um, plugged all the preamps, lined them up, plugged them all into the console. Then I had to see if it would work. I plugged headphones in. The headphone amp wasn't nearly loud enough. I had to put a Crown power amp into the headphone output, and then to amplify the headphones so I could get that. Then I had to start running cables up to the stage while the band themselves are walking in with their equipment, and the producer is just like running around. Can you help them? I said, I can't help them do anything. I'm busy enough on my own. Finally, they were able to free up one of the LA audio guys, Mark Radulovich, who helped me a lot.
Oh,
And he said, what can
Mark.
I do? And I said, please, I said, just start setting up some mics on the stage. I don't care even what you put up there for now. Let's just get some mics on. So we started doing that, running the cables up there. We ran out of inputs. I had to submix the drums with a Shure mixer because we didn't have enough inputs. Everything was hardwired. I had to run a monitor mix off the aux channel of the board. I think I had one aux channel that I could use. I was sitting out 5 feet in front of the band. I was like just sitting right in front of the stage with all of this. So everything was ridiculously loud right in front of my face. Um, and I remember thinking at the time, there's no way this is going to work. They're going to throw to us at the end of the show and they're going to hear nothing. That's all I could. I set up two hardwired hand mics for the anchors to come in. And when we're getting all this and the band starts to play, and at least I heard some sounds coming out of it. And I said, gee, maybe this will work. And it wasn't until as we were getting close, they came in and they said, how are you going to hear director? And I said, you know what? I can't. I can't. I don't have time to set it up. I said, it's the last thing in the show. When the anchors walk in, I'll hand them the mics and everything is open and they'll talk and that's the end. And when the show finishes, somebody will tell them to stop talking and that's it. I don't need director. So,
Yeah.
and that's
That's,
what we did. They the anchors, it was still Harry Smith and Kathleen Sullivan did it. They walked in. I gave them the mics. They walked onto the stage. Stage manager was set up through the cameras. Um, they spoke. They introduced them. They played. I had no way of telling really how it sounded because it was so loud in the place itself. Even with the headphones on, going through the Crown amplifier, I could hear it, but I couldn't really tell. But it worked. They did their first song. It came out. I knew it came out well enough. We went to a commercial. They had a second song, which was the new song that they really wanted to publicize. It was about Rosa Parks, and they were very proud of it. And they started to play, but unfortunately, everything had been mistimed at the end, and they only played about 30 seconds before we went off the air. And that was the end. And boy, they were pissed. They were pissed because this was the main song that they wanted to showcase. So, and I remember at the end also, once we went on, that was the end. So at that point, everybody who was on the floor of the main show was now able to come over. So at least everybody got into the club across the street. I remember Billy Nader was standing behind me holding my headphones on my head. He was holding it on, so at least I could hear a little bit better. He was standing behind me as the new position for audio assist. But so it made air. I heard it later on. I said, you know what? considering what it was and what I had expected out of it, I was yeah, that was a terrible feeling. Something I don't want to do again.
I I so totally hear you. All I could think of as you're telling this story, it's that scene from Apollo 13 when the guy comes in and he throws a whole bunch of junk on the table and they go, "Okay,
Yes.
you've got to make this fit in there and this is the only stuff you have to do and you have to make it work with just this shit."
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that.
And that so now, but I'm going to test your memory. That is not the
Yeah.
first time we had a band that was doing something special for something special and didn't make it on air because they mistimed it. All right. Way
Oh.
back, there was one. All right. The one night it was 4 a.m. and they came into us on the morning news and said, "Oh, Dizzy Gillespie and his band are going to be performing live at 8:30." We had to get a console and all this stuff, and they were appearing because they had wrote a song to celebrate Martin Luther King. It was some anniversary of Martin Luther King. You know, I don't know,
Right.
what was it, 20 years, whatever. And it was a special song, and we got everything all set up, and you were on the air, I was assist, and just before we were supposed to go to them, the line producer goes, "Oh, our segment on lipstick is running over. Tell the band we're not going to put them on. We'll tape it later." And they made me go in the back to Dizzy Gillespie and go, "Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Gillespie, but we're not going to go on live." And they said, "Wait, we came all this time, all this way to do this, and you're not on. We're not." And he was just speechless. And all I could do is I went, "Welcome to my world." And I think we taped it afterward, but he was
Right.
pissed. That was a history. Well, it's funny. This isn't totally related, and I hope I haven't told this before, but one of the worst experiences of my life is I got called one day, and they said, "You want some overtime?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I said, "What is it?" They said, "It's the NBA draft pick. It'll be at the Hilton Hotel, 7th Avenue, blah, blah, blah. Be there Sunday morning at 7 o'clock." And now, what people don't understand, you mentioned, the great Bob Siderman. Back then, there was remote crews and studio crews. And the remote
Right.
crews did all the remotes, all right? You went out on a lot because it was for the morning news. But for sports and everything, there was a whole crew. And they always sort of look down on us because the remote crews are much more talented because they've got to do this stuff in the remote. And the studio people, we look down at them because we knew for a fact that if they ever got assigned in the studio, they wouldn't have the slightest idea what's going on either. It was just, sort of a joke. So anyway, they said, be there. So I assumed, I'm going to do utility. I'm going to hold a camera cable or, I was going to be a grunt. It was overtime. So
Right.
I had never done a remote. Okay. I had never done a remote. And a 40-foot remote truck pulls up. This is the first time I ever saw a remote truck. Okay. And so I go to the EIC and I go, "So what am I doing?" He says, "You're the A1. You're the audio guy." And I'm going like, "What are you talking about? I've never done a remote in my life." "Well, you're on the list. I was on the same list as you and Jimenez and all the other people. I was an A1. And so all the other guys who were regulars, remote guys, I go, "Well, have one of them do it." And they go, "Oh, no. I don't do the truck. I don't do this." It's just, "We'll run it. We'll run everything. We'll plug it into the truck, but this is your problem." And the director was Duke Struck, my nemesis, and the producer was my other nemesis, and I'm blanking on his name. But you would remember it. Anyway, my two basically the Joker and Lex Luthor were my senior producer and director. So there I am. I'm in the audio booth in this truck, and I am freaking out. And I got to be honest with you, I was this close to just leaving, just going home. Now I knew I would be fired, and so I was planning. Well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So I figured, all right, if I can just get tone, the patch bay is blank. So I take a patch cord and I go, all right, if I can get some audio from here to there and have it come out the speaker, I'm on my way. And as I'm thinking this, a guy walks in and he goes, can I help you? And I go, what? Who are you? And this is when I discovered when you rent a truck, it comes with rented people who know how to use the truck. And he was the audio guy. And he said, well, what do you need? And I said, well, I need this. And he said, no problem. And he hooked the whole thing up, and I mixed it, and it was all fine. It went off without a hook, without a hitch. And that's when I realized that, from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic, take a deep breath, and find the truck guy. And it's held me in good, in good stand ever since. So you got another story, which you've told.
Well, I'll just
and
we're in 1988. I can just quickly tell you when I said about Harry Connick Sr. We had him on the show, and a day or so after that, just for the crew, we met at some restaurant, and they had a burlesque show there. I have some great pictures of this. But
that's great.
After the burlesque show and the place, they decided to walk to a restaurant, I think, that we were going to eat at. But it was like a few blocks away. Now, in New Orleans, a lot of times they have these parades. They have parades for everything. They have the funeral parades. So somehow the entire crew of CBS This Morning somehow walking down the street turned into a parade. And as we're walking, people are kind of, oh, what's this? And it's like, oh, it's a parade. And other people are just joining along the way. And suddenly we have like 20, 30, 40 people are walking down the middle of the street, led by our executive producer, Kathleen Sullivan. These are the people, and everybody's walking down the street. And as we get to intersections now, the police are holding up traffic so we can walk through. And we finally get to the restaurant, and we had a fun time there also. But the main thing is that afterwards they came in and evidently issued the executive producer some sort of a summons or something for having an unauthorized parade without the proper permits, and they gave it. And
I caught him
because we were blocking traffic or something. But because we had an in with the district attorney, I believe everything was just dismissed right away. So
dismissed. That's
it pays
wild.
to know people.
Pays to know people. I remember once way back then, me, my then wife, now ex-wife, and a few friends of ours, we were leaving Black Rock. We were crossing 6th Avenue to go to our car, and we got swept up in a gay pride parade. We couldn't cross the street. So we were carried along. So we ended up walking for like 6 blocks in this gay pride parade. And it was very, very strange, but they all seemed to be having a good time. So we just went, yay, gay pride, yeah, So before we get to the next story, we actually have sponsors, and I know you don't know that. And we're going to go to one of our sponsors, but I picked this one because I know, well, people at home don't know. Joey is a huge Beatles fan. I'm a huge Beatles fan, but I don't think there's a bigger Beatles fan than Joey. Joey's got everything, okay? And so we're sitting here waiting for your computer to come back because you blacked out.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, so anyway, you will like this one. And here it is.
Did you know that many of the most popular songs you hear in today's elevators and shopping malls were in fact written by the great masters? Yes, that's right. Most of these songs were written by the Beatles. And now, the Long John Sump Pump and Bassinet Society is offering you this special edition recording, The Beatles, The Elevator Years. You'll hear great selections like And who could forget? That's The Beatles, The Elevator Years. And now, here's your announcer to tell you how to order.
Call 1-900 P.O. Box 797 St. Louis, Missouri 60609. Check money order Visa, MasterCard, American Express not accepted.
Yes, that's one of our sponsors.
Very nice.
Yes, yeah, we the Long John Sump Pump and Bassinet Society has a whole bunch of things. No Time for Shakespeare. But anyway, you got one other story that I love, and we've
Is
discussed.
this the autographed Mike
whether
story you wanted to hear?
Yes, the autographed Mike story that you didn't want to tell because you didn't want to say who the person was. And so we've
Right.
decided to tell the story. Just don't tell us who the person was. Make
Right.
the audience
So
guess.
this
But go
is
ahead. This, again, true story.
This is an extremely well-known singer, female singer. So I'll leave it at that. A very, multiple Grammy-winning singer, and she was on the show promoting a charity event that she was involved with, and part of that involved her signing a microphone at some point in time and auctioning it off on eBay, and the money would go to one of the music charities. So it was connected, and it would go to the music charities and all of that. It was a great charity, and she was promoting that. So before this segment, they came on and said, because it involves a microphone, do you think you could just to dress up the set a little bit? Do you have like a nice looking microphone that you could put out on the set? And I said, sure. And I'll one of a Neumann U87 microphone, and it's one of the original ones. It's a nice, big, beautiful microphone. It's worth about $3,000. So we put it on a stand. It wasn't connected to anything, and they just put it out on the set to make it look a little nicer. Harry Smith did the interview. Everything we thought went okay, but at the end of the segment, as it finished, Harry, I don't know if Harry suggested it or not, but he said, "And you're going to sign a microphone?" And she said, "Yes." And with that, they took our Neumann microphone and she signed it and then gave it to her. And I heard on the intercom, the audio assist telling me, "Joe, she's signing our mic." And I go, I see that. And I said, "Don't give them the mic." So as soon as they finished and the segment was over, he came running downstairs with the microphone, and I took it and I put it in a cabinet and locked it. Immediately followed down by about 20 people, everybody from the show, from the artists, producers and people, the charity people, everybody comes down. They said, we need the microphone. I said, no, this was never supposed to be part of the deal. This is not it. So our executive producer came into the audio booth and he said, "Well, maybe we can just donate it for the charity. What does something like that cost?" And I said, "Well, it's about $3,000. And he said, No, we're not going to do that." So then I came up with the idea. I said, "Look, how about a Shure SM58? That's the standard microphone, handheld microphone. Everybody uses it. It cost a little over $100. And I said, "Right, there you go." And I said, "Why doesn't she sign this microphone? We'll give her this microphone, to sign." And then her person who was there, her publicist, said that the artist was very upset with some of the questions Harry had asked her, and she's upset she won't come out of her dressing room and she will not sign anything else. So now we're all standing there looking at each other and not knowing what to do. And I said, well, I'm not going to, give up the mic. And they said, well, we need the microphone. So finally, the charity people said, all right, we'll pay for the microphone. How do we deal with that? And I said, well, actually, that's not going to work either, because your check, written to CBS this morning is not going to end up getting me a microphone. It doesn't go back into an engineering budget. It goes into, different, also legal problems with that. And I said, that's not going to work. So the only way I can see this working is if you go and buy, because they still make new ones. I said, you go and buy me a new U87 and bring it over here and hand it to me. And then I will give you this one back after it's finished. And so they agreed to do that. I told them where they could buy it. They said, okay. I called our salesman who we knew down there and advised him of it. When he stopped laughing at the whole thing, he said he would let me know when it happens. He actually called Neumann to let them know about, just to tell them. And they called me and told me that because that was one of the earliest models made, they were able to trace the serial number. They said actually it was worth more than that. But then they printed a story about it later in one of their newsletters. But and it was also printed in some of the audio newsletters because it got out. But it took about 2 weeks. I got a call from the salesman saying the charity people came by. They bought the microphone. Sure enough, the next day they came by. I gave them the mic because at that point, even though it might have been worth more than the new one, because this was a vintage one, it was still going to charity. So we had to give that up. So they got the vintage mic. I got a new one. So at least I got the replacement out of it. The poor charity ended up paying for the whole thing. And I learned later the eBay auction went for just about $3,000, the same amount. It ended up, being, an even exchange on out of the whole thing. The person who, I don't know who it was, but the person who bought it probably wanted the microphone because there's no way that the autograph would have been worth that much money. It was the microphone that they bought. We even had, when everybody was in the studio, one of the maintenance guys came over and said, Joe, I can fix this and end this problem instantly with a little bit of alcohol. But I didn't want to go that route at the time. But interesting story.
It got lost.
Interesting story.
Wow. Yeah. The meetings with management and producers over the silliest things, which were just absolutely incredible. That would sometimes go on for weeks, and we would get sucked into it, and I would have such a hard time. All right, real quick, here's a good one. So we had to flash on one day. This was back in the early 80s. The Walter Cronkite studio was still the Walter Cronkite studio. I don't remember what studio what control room that became. I think it used to be 33. Oh, yeah, it became. Anyway, so it was like noon. They got a hold of me. The morning news was over. Said, run down to the Cronkite studio. We're flashing on. Plane fell out of the sky, something. So I go in there and, all the studios control rooms back then were the same. And so I, looked around like I normally do, and, I'm setting up, and I noticed that there was a bank that fed the IFB, that fed Dan Rather's IFB. Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite had long gone. And Dan was, well, actually, it wasn't that long gone. It's probably like maybe a year or so. But anyway, I noticed that he was getting everything fed to him, all the remotes, all the Macs, all the tape feeds, but he wasn't getting any microphones, including his own. So I turned it on. I thought, because on the morning news, we fed everything to the talent. because
Right.
when they hear themselves, they know that they're on the air. We never really gave it any thought. So we flash on, we flash off. Everything's fine, not a problem. The director and the executive producer were women, which was unusual back then. They were both very, very, very competent, very skilled. And so Dan, when the thing finishes, Dan goes to nobody in particular. He goes, I could hear myself during that flash on. And all of a sudden, the executive producer and the director crash into the audio booth and they go, Dan Rather could hear himself. And I'm going like, what? I go, well, okay, I guess that means he's not deaf. I go, what do you mean? He goes, he can hear himself. He can hear himself in his ear. Dan never hears himself in his ear. How did this happen? And I go, well, you see that button there? I said, yeah. I said, it was turned off. I turned it on. I said, I didn't know this. And to be honest, on the morning news,
It
we
works
feed
better.
the audio. It works better because that way they know that they're on the air. And they stop and they leave. And the next thing I know, they're all huddled around the desk. They're all huddled around Dan. And they're crouched and they're speaking in hushed terms. So I put his mic in cue so I can hear what they're talking about. And they're going, Dan, we think it's a good idea that you could hear yourself because that way you'd know that you're on the air. And he went, oh, okay. And they come back into the audio booth and they go, Dan will hear himself from now on. And I went, great. And I left walking out going like, these people are fucking insane. So around 5 o'clock that night, I get a phone call from Irv Elias. Irv was the audio guy for the morning news.
Right.
And I pick up the phone and he goes, Tommy, what the fuck did you do to me? And I go, Irv, what's the matter? He says, I've been in meetings all goddamn day. This is a nightmare. I said, what happened? Well, apparently, when the evening news executive producer and director came in, they were met by the special events executive producer and director who told them that Dan will now hear himself. But what? You did not consult with us. Dan will not hear himself. Yes, he will. No, he won't. Yes, he will. No, he won't. The meeting went up to the president of news. I think Governelli was involved. Poor Irv was involved. They're yelling and screaming back and forth and back and forth. And I'm just sitting at home laughing my ass off. But yeah, that's CBS in a nutshell. Well, listen, we've wasted another half hour, but this was a fun one. Great stories. Everybody can guess who that person might have been. If you guess right, well, we probably still won't tell you. But let's get to the plug
Right.
super quick. Serendipity Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth, Maryland's blog. We all love it. A half-hour radio show. Still the funniest half-hour radio show on the air. That's a half hour. Voicescapes Audio Theater for the best in audio comedy and drama. And, of course, my sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn, where we talk about life, the universe, and whatever's written in the teleprompter. And a show I really think you should watch. I was involved in it. It was originally done on the CBS radio network in 1941. It's called Between Americans. And it's more relevant today than it was then. So, Joey, thanks for coming back. We have to do a zillion more of these because you've just got way too many stories. But in the meantime, see ya.